Welcome to What Healthy Couples Know That You Don't, a podcast dedicated to helping you create the relationship you truly want.
Codependency, losing track of you in relationships and how to find yourself again. Episode 136. So glad you've joined me today. You are keeping it real with Rhoda. Today is all about understanding codependency. So let's begin with the dictionary definition. Excessive emotional or psychological reliance on a partner. Someone who is codependent finds purpose and happiness in too much sacrifice for another person. Relationships require sacrifice. So the question emerges, what is too much? We are all fingerprints of individuality. So the equation is a different balance for each of us. It is important to recognize that codependency is on a continuum. Now at 72, I recognize that the future will most likely require immense care as one of us painfully deteriorates, as two good friends of ours are coping with. One has his husband in ICU for 4 months and counting. This sacrifice is a part of long-term loving. If you are wondering how to determine how much is too much, or suspect you are codependent in an unhealthy amount for you, then you may have neglected too many important parts of your own life. Like a juggler in the circus, you need to be aware of your own needs, not just your partner's, and sense when you've begun to lose track of yourself. So let's begin with a question. How much do you rely on other people to make you feel good about yourself? It's always your job to make yourself feel good. Other people can certainly help you out in that process. Balancing both the good and the bad of who you are is real self-worth. It's understanding that you have to let the good and the bad sit quietly next to each other and not let one erase the other. This takes a lot of work to achieve. We tend to dwell in the bad and let it erase the good. Your mood and feelings about yourself cannot depend on other relationships, while at the same time, we are all certainly influenced by others. It's why I often hope that teenage girls don't have boyfriends too quickly, because they get so wrapped up in pleasing someone else instead of exploring who they are. A classic adolescent response would be, you want me to have long hair, so I'll give up enjoying short hair in the summertime. Then again, if you want to please your partner and give up enjoying short hair in the summertime, that could be okay too. That's what makes codependency so confusing. It's really about the amount in the lopsided pile of choices that are for somebody else. I'm going to say that again because it's really important. Codependency is really about the amount in the lopsided pile of choices that are for somebody else. The key is to consider yourself as part of the choices you make. If your sole focus is on someone else, then you begin to lose track of yourself. You need to shuttle back and forth between yourself and your partner. There are certainly times when the lopsided caretaking relationship during illness makes sense. In the illness of addiction, codependency can become enabling and keep things moving away from recovery instead of towards it. So this is clearly not easy to determine or sort out. It's very messy. If you are overly generous, then you are not shuttling towards yourself enough to determine your wants. It's crucial to be able to identify and to know your own wants. It is only in knowing your own wants that makes a choice an honest one. In many episodes, I have mentioned that it is choicefulness that makes you mentally healthy. So it is imperative to understand what's important to you and what keeps you grounded, separate from anybody else on the planet. If you are a people pleaser, then you are not shuttling towards yourself enough. People pleasers like the comfort of being liked and avoiding conflict. People pleasers have lost track of themselves and then go sideways to get their needs met. They say yes and go along to get along, which ends up by building a giant pile of unspoken resentments. Resentments so easily contaminate and destroy relationships. It's our job to be more authentic when we disagree so that our partner knows who we really are. Insecurities make us hide behind smiles and say yes instead of no. Insecurities make us hide behind saying no all too often and avoiding the saying of yes. Insecurities make us overly generous. Insecurities feed our belief that I'm okay only if you're okay. Insecurities make us crawl into comfort and avoid being uncomfortable. Insecurities make it hard for us to ever apologize, or to apologize so often it doesn't ring true. Insecurities make us hide our real feelings by swallowing them or exaggerating them in a giant angry dump that solves nothing. Insecurities create habits of hiding that erase our ability to make honest, real choices. Insecurities help us avoid taking responsibility for our mistakes and instead blame others. Insecurities feed codependency so much. And then there's too much independence that you end up not feeling connected with your partner at all. Now I want to flush out some of the subtle ways codependency sneaks into relationships. I have copyright permission to use the novel Anita DeMonte Laughs Last by Xochitl Gonzalez. I highly recommend reading this book to understand how two lovely, talented women get caught in a trap of codependency. The first quote is spoken by Anita. Quote, "What I saw was the most dangerous thing of all in a man, insecurity, because they will crawl over and push down anyone around them in their desperate thrashing to be affirmed at the top. Insecurity is indeed a powerful force. And if someone lacks self-awareness about their insecurities, then it becomes a sword to cut others down so they feel good by being powerful." This second quote is spoken by Raquel. She found herself replaying all the occasions when he'd made her feel less than. She began to feel that by playing up her insecurities, he made himself feel more secure. So it's important to watch for patterns. Certainly on occasion, a partner will poke at you and make you feel bad about yourself unnecessarily. It is a pattern of making you feel less than that is dangerous to your mental health. And clearly, it is respect for the differences that is missing. Respect is more important than love to build a long-term relationship. Respect is a bond that can help our relationship endure over time because it leaves room for the parts you don't like. Respect builds on honesty, apology, and making amends. Respect builds on being willing to do the work of understanding. Respect helps people to conflict in a constructive way without ugliness. Respect does not need to create a pattern to diminish the other person. Respect is honest feedback and being open to learning about the ways you need to improve to be a better partner. Something we all can work at. Respect does not diminish the other person. There is a real lack of respect in our culture at large today, and ugliness towards strangers is sadly more acceptable. I myself try only to be ugly to robot menus by shouting representative. Might be a good goal in 2025. Codependency is summed up by Raquel's friend Betts in the book. You fall for someone, you get so into them, your whole world shrinks, and suddenly you barely have a life besides them. In the beginning, this is true of anyone falling in love. It's why we ignore red flags and are overly generous in dismissing problems or warning signals. Once again, this becomes a problem when it continues as a pattern over time. We must learn to pay attention to our inner voice that is more cautious. Her friend Jael chides Raquel when he says to her, "You've swallowed this idea that there's some people whose approval or validation will fill you. But in the process, you've lost your ability to validate yourself and to feel that's enough." When he says this in the book, Raquel ignores this advice, just as people in new relationships too often dismiss their friends' concerns and worries when they're expressed. The deliciousness of this novel is how well it captures falling into a relationship that is not okay and allowing codependency to take over, believing that it's love. Raquel recognizes, quote, that his suggestions, his implications, his aesthetics were superior to her own instincts and desires, that his preferences were more important than her preferences, his needs more important than her own wants. This is exactly the insidious process of how codependency creeps into a relationship earlier in the book. Raquel realizes her boyfriend, quote, Nick, had slowly, one grievance or incident at a time, causing a shift in how she prioritized her time. When you lose track of what matters to you or what's important to you besides the relationship, then you begin to lose yourself. One of the most important ways codependency can be interrupted is by risking conflict. Choosing a battle for things that really matter to you, which does not have to be ugly. Raquel and Anita both begin to recognize that conflict matters. Raquel realizes Nick, quote, had an uncanny ability to turn things into personal rejections. And because that was so far from what Raquel even intended, it never felt worth the conflict to push back. One of my favorite parts of the book is Anita's recognition of the importance of conflict. What the F is wrong with conflict sometimes? It makes your brain better. It makes you fight harder. It makes you more convinced in what you believe and who you are. I've always believed that anger is an important way for anyone to find themselves by putting together that puzzle of who they really are and what matters. And you might begin with the very small irritations and annoyances, because that's those little moments of separation that tell you, ooh, you like this. You'd rather not do that. And that's the things to listen to. Sarah Paulson was the star of the Broadway play Appropriate, and she was so deliciously full of rage. It was amazing to see her performance, and completely unforgettable, which is what I think great art is. It resonates deeply inside. I will also never forget the impact this book has had on me because of how it captures the nuances of codependency in two relationship stories. Anita is based on a true story of the artist Anita Mendieta, whose work was overshadowed by her artist husband, Carl Andre. It is likely that he pushed her out of a 34-story window in 1985, and because he was so famous, managed to be found innocent in trial. She was only 35 years old. So one of the most important ways to find yourself is to practice being more authentic with small, intentional risks. It's important to practice with small moments. For example, disagreeing with a friend about what the best Italian restaurant is. Humor is another way to let yourself interact in a more genuine way with someone else. Improving can even begin by being more honest with yourself about what you believe, what you feel, or what you think, instead of quickly erasing something that might be disagreeable. Don't let your fears erase these small moments when you practice. Recognize that you're also being more intimate because you're letting someone else know who you truly are, and that matters. Another tool would be boundaries. Boundaries are like speed bumps, and that's really an important way to think about them. They're not an axe chopping off someone's head. They're speed bumps. They just slow you down. No one has to be hit over the head with a boundary, though many times boundaries are ignored and certainly must be repeated until they are respected and understood. Boundaries are our way to find out whether or not respect is truly a part of the relationship. One example might be on a date where the new person is describing their last relationship with far too much detail, and to be able to say to them, you know, that's not really something I want to hear a whole lot about on a first date. There's a great little book called Boundaries, Cohen, Where You and I Begin by Anne Catherine that can be very helpful to learn more about boundaries. They're so important. Learning more about who you are also requires learning to tolerate frustration and disappointment. I watched a mother with a 4-year-old daughter who climbed up the white spiral entrance to the beach in Fort Lauderdale. She did well growing up and was baffled for a moment, just a moment, about how to go back down. And her mother leaked into that space of confusion to solve it for her prematurely. Instead of letting her be uncomfortable and find her own way out, which the child easily could have done, there was nothing dangerous going on. If you're going to define who you are, you have to be willing to be uncomfortable, which I've said so many times. It's all about growing. You have to have one foot in comfort and one foot in uncomfortability. And then you can grow. Addiction to comfort and only the familiar has become a terrible trap for so many people. In the 3rd season of the wonderful series on HBO, Somebody Somewhere, which New Yorker said was one of the top 3 shows in 2024, you can see Joel avoid conflict with Brad and give up too much of himself as he's in this process of moving in. The show is really about Joel's glorious friendship with Sam, short for Samantha, who helps him recognize this is happening just by asking a few honest questions. Then you watch Joel ask Brad for pictures on the fridge, more time with friends, and his beloved piano returns. His final step in breaking free of his codependence, which was initial because they were just moving in and is completely understandable. But how you tease out what works for each of you and what can work for both of you requires an enormous amount of negotiation. And he returns to his own church instead of following Brad's church. This messy business of being connected to yourself and connected to others is incredibly important. And you have to be able to bear moments of disconnection and connection, shuttling back and forth between yourself and others. It's a different equation for every relationship, and it's worth the work of figuring out the correct balance. Every relationship requires dependence and separateness. It's the lopsidedness that you want to watch out for. Homework. Number 1, add 5 years onto the age that you are now and ask yourself, separate from every relationship in your life, what would be important to you if you were going to die at the end of those 5 years? Number 2, imagine who it is you'd like to be. Write down your own ideas without editing. Then create some small steps to help you make that happen. For example, you'd like to be more thoughtful, so be sure to acknowledge one person a day. Number 3, what anchors you in the world? It could be reading, pets, gardening, bicycling. Consider small, medium, and large possibilities. Number 4, make a collage about you. Divide it into 3 parts: the past, the present, and the future. Use real pictures, cut them out of magazines, glitter, quotes, poems. Take the time to glue it on poster board. Relationships with others can only be a small part of the collage. Number 5, and this is to create a little more self-awareness. Make a list of things or people or situations that drain you. And then make a list of what replenishes your energy. Thanks so much for listening. You can find me at Rhoda on Couples on Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, and X.
Thank you for listening to What Healthy Couples Know That You Don't. If you have enjoyed the show, please leave a rating and review on iTunes and help get the word out. To learn more or connect with Rhoda, visit therapyideas.net.